He says, "Welcome, Tony Stark, the most famous mass murderer in the history of America."
You know, there is a dark truth to Tony Stark that we have avoided talking about for quite a long time. Really, in a lot of ways, he's not the hero that we thought he was. In a lot of ways, he actually belongs in jail. And I know it's been a while since I've put out a video that's avidly made people want to smash the dislike button faster than they can think. But if you hear me out, I think you're gonna find that I'm probably right. Here we go. So Marvel keeps going back to the Tony well, and what I mean is a shockingly high number of Marvel villains seem to have a grudge with Tony Stark himself. I mean, Vulture, Whiplash, Mysterio, Ultron, Wanda, Baron Helmut Zemo, and the Not Mandarin.
I am the Mandarin!
And you can even argue that it was Tony's contribution that led to the possibility of Project Insight and Winter Soldier.
Continuous suborbital flight courtesy of our new repulsor engines.
And it's weird that a huge number of characters seem to all consider Tony Stark to be a villain. But the truth is, it's not without cause. And there is a very good reason to why so many people in the MCU seem to have a problem with Tony Stark. See, Marvel is a very grounded series. I mean, with the exception of a huge amount of supernatural things like magic and superpowers and pseudoscience, the non-superpowered characters all seem to be pretty normal people. Coupled with that, most of them also live in real-world locations and have seemingly pretty normal lives, making it much easier for us as viewers to immerse ourselves in that universe, possibly seeing ourselves as just one of these background characters in these movies. But phase 1 of Marvel was a lot less grounded than it was now. And in a time of pseudoscience and tilty cams, I feel like we weren't as critical as we should have been about who people actually were. And that brings us, of course, to Tony Stark, all the way back in Iron Man 1. And so in this movie, we are first introduced to the character of Tony Stark. We are introduced to the billionaire playboy, who at this point is absolutely not a philanthropist.
I need it.
As it seems that pretty much everything he does is purely in his own self-interest. And yet, that's not the reason why anyone is mad at him. Not a single person who complains about Tony Stark is ever mad at his playboy nature, or the fact that he's an entitled billionaire, who was the son of another billionaire. No, the thing that people are always mad at with Tony Stark is corruption. Because that's right, Tony Stark was corrupt, because honestly, it's hard to come up with another character in the MCU who is anywhere close to as corrupt as Tony Stark. Does that claim seem out of nowhere and a bit grandiose? Maybe, but maybe not. See, the big issue that Stark Industries is faced with in Iron Man 1 is the fact that they were dealing under the table. They were selling weapons to enemies of the state, including, but possibly not limited to, the 10 rings. Or the fake 10 rings, we're not entirely sure. And it's because of these shady deals that many people lost their lives. That might even include Wanda Maximoff, aka Scarlet Witch's parents, because the truth is, we don't fully know who killed them. I mean, Wanda says it was the Americans, but she was a child, and we don't fully know if she was correct. What was she basing that on? Well,
when the first shell hits 2 floors below, it makes a hole in the floor. And on the side of the shell is painted one word: Stark.
But the truth is, Tony Stark was CEO of Stark Industries. And with being CEO comes several responsibilities, including, but not limited to, liability. Because as CEO of Stark Industries, Tony Stark could be held responsible for Stark weapons being distributed to enemies of the state. In fact, Tony even confirms in Iron Man 1 that between himself and Obidiah Stane, the two of them had a controlling interest in Stark Industries.
It doesn't matter, we own the controlling interest in the company.
Meaning they pretty much had full executive decision over the company's behaviors, making them extremely liable for the illegal stuff the company had been doing. And yes, Tony did not know that the company was dealing weapons to the 10 rings, but the fact is that legally, this doesn't matter. As they say, negligence of the law is not an excuse. And how does Tony react upon finding out that his weapons had entered the wrong hands? Tony does something that would inevitably create a bunch more enemies. See, when Tony gets back, he immediately shuts down the weapons manufacturing department, which has a colossal effect on Stark Industries as a whole. Anyone who worked in the weapons manufacturing department is now out of a job. So congratulations, guys who have done nothing wrong and have worked at this company for the last 30 years. You guys have all been fired. Without cause, without reason, and without regret. And Stark Industries is not a small company. The company itself was modeled after real-world companies like Lockheed Martin and Boeing, which means that the Stark weapons manufacturing department probably encompasses thousands of employees that are now all looking for work. And what makes it even worse is the stock market. See, not only does shutting down this department put a bunch of hardworking Americans out of work, but it sabotages them much further than that, because it immediately tanks Stark Industries' share price. And it goes by in passing, but this stock drop is actually huge. I don't even have to speculate on how big it was, because it's actually shown in the movie that Stark Industries lost 40% of its value overnight because of what Tony said. So what, billionaires are losing some of their billions? No, it matters because of retirement accounts. Practically every single major aeronautics company in the US has company 401ks. They have company retirement accounts that they use to help their employees save for retirement. But those retirement contributions are usually handed out in the forms of company stock. And so for the employees who had been working at Stark Industries for their entire lives, this price drop accounts for you losing over 40% of your retirement savings. So congratulations, people of the weapons manufacturing department at Stark Industries. Congratulations to everyone who worked on the extremely successful deployment of the Jericho missile. You guys are all fired, and you lost 50% of your savings. Bye! Let's talk about another one of his crimes, because boy, there were many. Let's talk about embezzlement.
So now the assholes who made this mess are getting paid to clean it up.
Yeah, it's all rigged.
Yes, sirree, Bob. It's not a big enough deal that Stark Industries has been quietly making a profit by selling weapons to enemies of the state, but Tony is actively stealing from the company. See, the major thing that Tony Stark does in Iron Man 1 is he creates the first Iron Man suit. He designs, develops, and builds the Iron Man armor. But the problem with this is, the Iron Man suits belong to Stark Industries, and this is because of intellectual property laws.
You really think that just because you have an idea, it belongs to you?
See, when working at a company, if you work on a project for that company, you don't own that project. That project is owned by that company. Otherwise, that would be a huge legal nightmare. And therefore, the company itself owns those products. But what is the distinction between things you work for at a company or things you work for on your own? You can really boil it down to 3 simple rules. Anything you work on belongs to the company you work for if you either did it on company time, did it because of a company project, or did it using company resources. And boy, oh boy, does Tony ever fit in this category. Because the entire Iron Man armor is designed using all of his tech tools. Tech tools including Jarvis, including his personal fabricator. And as Tony seems to have no fine line between determining what belongs to him and what belongs to the company, Jarvis itself and the AI for Jarvis may be a Stark Industries asset. It follows that the Iron Man suit belongs to the company as well. And by that logic, the government would be completely within their rights to seize the Iron Man suit, especially if they found out that Stark Industries had been responsible for a lot of international trade violations.
It was an illegal seizure of trademark property. Listen, it's our position that Stark has and continues to maintain proprietary ownership of the Mark II platform.
Not to mention, Tony seems to be repetitively using huge amounts of money in order to purchase things, without any sense of clarity as to where this money is coming from. It seems abundantly clear that Tony Stark is using Stark Industries funds in order to fund his own personal ventures. Extremely expensive personal ventures, might I add. Take that, shareholders. I mean, things are not looking good for you.
How quickly can we buy this building?
But let's put aside the white-collar crimes that Tony Stark has committed right now. Let's put those aside and ignore the many years of jail time that Tony Stark should be facing. Let's talk about what Tony actually did when he realized that his company had been delivering weapons to terrorists. Upon figuring out from Christine Everard that Stark Industries had been delivering weapons under the table, he never brings this information to light. There's never a formal inquest, this information is never brought to the government. Instead, Tony handles the entire matter privately. And how does he handle it? He flies over to an active war zone in a piece of Stark Industries technology and uses that to destroy his weapons. And he's not even hiding this either, this is exactly what he's doing.
They've been dealing under the table and I'm gonna stop them. I'm gonna find my weapons and destroy them.
Which on one hand is good because he's taking weapons away from villains, but this can easily be seen as him destroying evidence. Destroying all the evidence against him that would surely indict him in court, without saving any images or any recordings to prove that this actually happened. Really, what this is a tech genius version of shredding documents when you find out that the SEC has come knocking. And this might actually have been the secret plotline of Iron Man 1 this whole time. The actual reason to why Obidiah Stane actually tried to kill Tony Stark. Because if you think about it, Obidiah already had complete control over the company. Tony had been taking a backseat role and letting him make all the decisions. And Obidiah himself was an extremely successful billionaire. So what was it that pushed Obidiah over the edge? What made him finally decide to try to kill Tony Stark? The answer was probably this. It was the scandal. It was the fact that the illegal trades that Stark Industries had been doing had finally come to light.
You've been called the Da Vinci of our time. What do you say to that?
Absolutely ridiculous. I don't paint.
And what do you say to your other nickname, the Merchant of Death?
And as they were about to be exposed, Obidiah needed a fall guy. Obidiah needed to protect Stark Industries, to protect the shareholders, and protect his own interests. A person who was foolish enough and self-interested enough to work with the Ten Rings, which due to their own recklessness led to them being killed, putting a neat and final end to this conspiracy. After all, if this conspiracy comes to light, Obidiah Stane could just say, it wasn't us, it was Tony Stark, the CEO, who had made all these decisions. And because he worked with the Ten Rings, he managed to annoy them, and that's why they killed him. But guys, Tony Stark really is my favorite Avenger. He's my favorite hero in the MCU. His arc to try to redeem himself is really interesting and one of the best parts of the MCU. And really everyone in the MCU is lucky that Tony managed to get away with it, because if he wasn't around, then Thanos would have won. But I think we can all see that Tony Stark really did belong in jail. But anyways, guys, that's just what I think. Let me know in the comments down below if you agree with me and this is a good reason to why Tony Stark keeps being brought up as a villain in the MCU. And I'll see all of you in the next video. Bye!